Well, the NFL season is underway, and that can only mean one thing: waivers. Today, we're going to talk about blind bid waivers, and the two most frequent questions that I get about FAAB bidding are, should I be aggressive and spend early, or should I hold and spend later? And how much should I spend for this guy? Well, one of those two should be your very last question, not your first, and the other is irrelevant. So how do we get away from thinking in terms of these two questions? We'll talk about that as we apply the FAAB Four, the four fundamentals of waiver bids, on this episode of Dynasty Compass. Hello and welcome to another episode of Dynasty Compass. I am your host, Jeff Blaylock, the other Jeff B from Footballguys, and the football season is finally here. We've had a full slate of games in week one. We're getting pumped up for week two. As I record this, it is the afternoon of Wednesday, September the 10th, so some things I might talk about today may be different by the time you hear or watch this episode. Now, with football season, that means that free agent acquisition budgets, or FAAB, are now one of the talks of the town. And I've said in a previous episode that the biggest mistake that dynasty managers make is that they make roster moves without having an overall strategy in place. Now, when you don't have a strategy in place and you're making moves, a number of things that are going to happen that aren't particularly positive. First of all, you're just going to have a lot of hand-wringing over who to bid for and how much to bid for them, and that's just not necessary. You don't need to put yourself through all of that. You're also going to find yourself bidding for the wrong players. You're going to find yourself dropping the wrong players. You're going to pick up players only to drop them a week or two later, and all of this adds to wasted time, wasted effort, and wasted FAAB budget. Now, in the cold open, I mentioned that I get two questions most frequently about FAAB bidding, and both of them can be indicative of this kind of mistake, of making moves without a strategy in place. The first of those questions is, how much should I bid? And I find that to be putting the cart before the horse. The real question should be, why would I bid on this player? Once I've determined that, then I can place a proper value on it. And it's going to be a combination of what the problem is you're trying to solve, what kind of player this is, what's the time frame for a return on investment, and what's the opportunity cost of making that bid. And if you picked up on the title of FAAB Four, that was four considerations I just put out there. So we'll call that foreshadowing and get back to that in a minute. The second popular question is, should I spend early or late? It's a strategic question, or at least it's framed as a strategic question, but it's actually not particularly strategic at all. And in reality, in the way I look at the world, it's irrelevant. You spend when it most helps your roster. It might be week two. It might be entering the playoffs. It might be several points in time. It might be no time at all. Whether you spend your budget early or late is really focusing on the wrong part of the equation. The why is much more important than the when. If you answer the why, then you know the answer to when. So today we're going to talk about what I call the FAAB Four. Now, I'm not going to mention a particular rock band from England because I don't want to get involved in any kind of trademark disputes or any of that. You'll notice if you're watching, that I'm spelling it differently. And if you are listening, it's FAAB, FAAB Four, when I talk about this. So no relation whatsoever to a certain British band. And so let's run through these real quickly. These are the four fundamental parts of making a free agent bid. The first one is, what problem am I trying to solve? The second one is, what kind of player is this that I'm about to bid on? The third question is, when do I expect to get value from this player? And the fourth one is, what am I giving up if I successfully bid on this player? Once you've answered these four questions, and in that order, you'll know exactly whether to bid and when to bid and how much to bid. So let's start with the first one. What problem am I trying to solve? Now, many managers approach Tuesday night, which is the night waivers run in most leagues. Many managers approach Tuesday night by seeing who is available on the wire and then deciding whether to make a bid on a player-by-player basis. Or perhaps they're looking at positions instead of needs. So they're looking at, say, running backs with this vague concept of maybe I should get a running back. Let's see who's available. Now, I think this is approaching the waivers from the wrong direction. It's like following a map upside down. What we really need to be doing is starting by looking at our rosters and our lineups and asking ourselves, what holes do I have in my starting lineup, first and foremost? What holes do I have on my bench? What is it that I'm missing that I can bolster my team a little bit farther down the road? And then what holes do I have for the future? When I look a season or 2 or 3 out beyond now, what holes am I seeing in my roster going forward? And then we ask ourselves, as we look at this list of players that's available, who is available that might fill one of those holes? So as we're looking then at this list of players that are available on waivers, you can start seeing players that might happen to check 1 or 2 of those boxes. And then we need to ask ourselves, what kind of a player is this? And I don't mean it from an actual football sense of what kind of a player they are. I mean it from a roster management sense. Now, a couple of episodes ago, we talked about this at great length. And the key question that we asked ourselves at that time was, what does it take for me to put this player into my starting lineup? Is it someone who could go into my lineup immediately? Is it someone who is waiting on a certain condition to happen? Or is it like a bank shot in pool and I need several different things to go a certain way in order for that player as a billiard ball to fall into the pocket? But understanding these classifications will help you determine what kind of a player this is, and understanding what the conditions are to get them in your starting lineup will really help you determine what kind of player this is. Now, I'll run over these really quickly. There'll be a link at the bottom or in the show notes if you want to go back and watch our episode on what kind of player is this, our player classification system, which also includes a discussion of startability, something that I call the startability ladder. That link will be down below or in the show notes. The 5 types of players. You have cornerstones, you have set and forget, you have next man up, you have developing talent, and then you have dart throw. Cornerstones, the face of the franchise. You are not likely to find one of these on the waiver wire at any point during a season. They can come. Sometimes they'll be found. I found Kyron Williams on waiver wires in the summer of 2023, got him for practically nothing, and he's proven to be a league winner for me and a cornerstone of several of my teams. So they are out there if you can identify them far enough in advance. Set and forgets are regular contributors that are locked into NFL starting roles. And again, you're probably not likely to find one of these guys unless we're talking about a league with really shallow benches. And then there may be regular NFL starters who are, in fact, on the waiver wire on a regular basis. The guys you're more likely to find start with next man up. This would be a bye week or injury fill-in, plugging an immediate hole or potential short-term deficiency. And so these would be the ones who, among the players on the waiver wire, are most likely to be able to be inserted into your starting lineup right now. Then there's developing talent. These are investments in the future. These are players who don't have a particularly clear path forward to meaningful playing time right now, but they might down the line, who is developing, who's maybe sitting behind someone else, who's learning the game, but who in 2 or 3 years may be a starter. That kind of a player. That's who we're talking about with developing talent. And then finally, we have dart throw. And dart throws are going to be who most waiver wire players are. I mean, let's just be honest. Most waiver wire players are on the waiver wire because they don't fit on other people's teams or because no one wanted them. So what you're looking for here is upside, or you're looking for startability in specific situations. There's low probabilities that these players would be in your starting lineup, or there would be a number of things that would have to happen for you to insert them in your starting lineup. Now, one of the things that I see a lot of, particularly in Dynasty, and I know I've done it myself before I landed upon the system that I use now, the most common thing I see is swapping out dart throws, adding a dart throw and releasing a dart throw, and repeating this sort of catch and release pattern where I am cycling through the flavor of the week dart throws that are on the waiver wire. This is it's like rearranging your patio furniture, putting new cushions on it, moving the furniture around the patio. At the end of the day, it's still patio furniture. And in all of that work, all of that effort, you didn't increase the value of your house at all. You just rearranged furniture. You're expending energy. You're expending resources. You might be burning through FAAB budget with no tangible benefit. And this leads you to dropping the players that you just acquired a week or two ago to make room for the guy you now want to acquire, who you may very well drop 2 or 3 weeks from now. So we want to get out of that trap and be much more strategic about what kind of player we're going after. Now we're going to look at the time horizon. When do I expect this player to deliver value to my team? And there are several different time frames that we can work with here. The first and most urgent, of course, is immediately. The player fills an urgent hole or upgrades a current next man up situation. These are people you are intending to plug in immediately. If they can't provide immediate value and that's what you need, you don't need to get the player. The second time frame would be later this season. The player has the potential to be an asset as a bye week or injury replacement down the line, a week or 2 or 3, or they have upside that can turn into production under the right circumstances. So these would be next man up and dart throw categories of players. You're picking them up now with an anticipation of inserting them into your lineup in the future if the right circumstances were to happen. Our third time frame would then be a future season. This is a player who is a developing talent. He may become a starter at some point. He may at least become a next man up for you, but not now, not this season. This is a down the road thing. It's a unique aspect of Dynasty that we are looking out several seasons, not just for the now. So the future season becomes a thing to look for on the waiver wire all the time. And the final time horizon is one that a lot of people don't think about at all, and it is trade bait. That the player I'm trying to get today on the waiver wire, doesn't necessarily fit my team. I'm okay with him being there, but he's not really part of my plan. But he can be part of a package of players that I get to trade for another player. We overlook this aspect a lot because it requires us to think multiple moves ahead, not about injuries and not about things that cause this player to get in the lineup, but about what plan do we have to bring another player in a trade that we can use this player on the waiver wire to help us do. Typically here, we're talking about next man up, developing talent, or flavor of the week dart throws. So this would be an opportunity, if you were really strong in wide receivers, that you would go ahead and pick up a wide receiver next man up off the waiver wire, even though you do not need him for your starting lineup, because somebody else probably does. And do you know how you find out who needs them? They also bid on him. The fourth FAAB Four fundamental, and it's also another one that is frequently overlooked, is what am I giving up to bid on this player? The technical term for this is opportunity cost. This is what is it going to cost me in terms of future flexibility or things I can do later if I want to do this right now. I see 4 particular aspects of things that you might be giving up. The first and most obvious is FAAB dollars. These could be used to acquire other players. They could be part of a trade package, or at the very, very least, you're sitting at the table with a very large stack of chips that requires somebody to make a bold move, who wants to make a bold move to overspend in order to get somebody. So you lose an opportunity to sort of force another manager to spend a lot of money to get a player. So FAAB dollars, the obvious thing that you'd be giving up. The second sort of obvious thing that you'd be giving up is the player that you're going to have to drop. In a lot of cases, as we get to the season, your roster is full, and unless you can move somebody to injured reserve, you're going to have to drop somebody to gain somebody. So you need to think about what's the value of the player you're going to drop. A third aspect of something that you are giving up is also something that isn't thought about very often. And really savvy dynasty managers who are looking ahead several moves have to think about this particular aspect of what they give up if they bid on a player. And it is what I call lost trade surplus. Now, that's kind of an eye-rolling term. I wish I had a better term for it than that, but that's what I call it. And what it means is that you have used waivers to fill a hole in your lineup, on your roster depth, or in building for the future. And now you've checked the box that that hole is filled, and so you no longer look to fill that hole. So you don't pursue a trade or you don't pursue another acquisition to fill the hole because you just filled it. Now, most likely, a trade is going to be a better option for you for getting value onto your team. There are better options that solve your problems on somebody else's roster in place of going to the waiver wire. And then a fourth thing that you could be giving up on is strategic direction. Are you giving up on the path that you have been setting yourself up for this whole season, through the entire offseason, by making this move? Are you bringing on a player that conflicts with your overall goal because you are trying to spend your FAAB dollars to bring in an emergency starter, trying to win, even though you told yourself before the season started that I am rebuilding? So now we've covered the 4 FAAB fundamentals, and the answers to these questions are going to guide your decision about whether to bid on a player. You know if the player addresses the hole you're trying to fill. You know what kind of value they could bring to you as a starter. You know when that value cashes in, whether it's immediately or later this season or in a future season or as part of a trade. And you know what you're giving up. So now let's address that popular question. How much should I bid for this guy? Now we're at the end of the thought process, and this becomes a very appropriate question rather than asking it at the beginning. Now, for me, I tend to set a budget. I allocate my FAAB dollars among the different categories of players based on what direction that I'm headed. Now, way back at the very beginning of this series, we talked at length about the 4 directions: north, west, south, and east. That link will also be down below and in the show notes to that episode if you want more details. But here's Cliff Notes. North is perennial contender, where you are competing for championships year after year after year. West is win now, putting all of your chips on the table to win the championship this year, even if it costs you in future seasons. South is a total rebuild. You are tearing the roster apart. You are going for youth. You're going for developing talent. You're looking toward the future to win, but you're not winning now. And East is what I would call a chip in a chair. You've found yourself in a potential playoff spot, even with a roster that's not strong enough to be there. So you can make the moves that get you into the playoff tournament. And once you're in the tournament, anything can happen. Based on which direction I'm heading in, that determines the percentage of my FAAB budget that I want to allocate toward the different classifications of players. Now, let me start right off by saying if there is a cornerstone or a set and forget starter on the waiver wire today, I am willing to put 100% of my FAAB budget into that player. I will not find a better option on the waiver wire this season. I'm going to put everything down on this player, and I'm either going to get this player or I'm going to completely drain someone else's resources in the process. So I'm willing to do that. Put everything down on a player. If it's somebody I can put in my lineup now and week after week after week, that is by far the best thing I could possibly do on a waiver wire, and it is worth spending everything, regardless of when we're talking about the season. So beyond that, taking 100%, spending it on this one player, we're going to look at how we might otherwise divvy up this 100%. And when I mean 100%, I mean that off the total budget you had to begin with, not whatever budget you may have now. So if you had a $100 budget and you spent $40 and I say 50%, I mean $50, not $30. That's what 50% means when I talk about percentages of your FAAB budget. Now, if you're heading north, 60% is what I'd allocate to my next man up, because I am trying to acquire pieces that are going to help me and bolster me winning. I have a strong roster now, so I may not have a lot of holes to fill. So I'm willing to spend more to get my guy. 30% would go to developing talent, and just 10% on dart throws. I don't need to be taking chances on outlier players now because I'm already a strong team. Let me spend my effort on now and then in the future. If I am headed west, that is win now. 80% of my budget is going to go to next man up. 20% to dart throw. I'll take a couple of chances for some high upside, and I am not spending a single FAAB dollar on developing talent. That is not what I'm about right now. I'm trying to win right now. 100% of my resources needs to go to that. Anything that I divert toward the future, that's a goal conflict. That is me taking resources away from my primary strategic direction and trying to build up another direction. 100% of my FAAB budget needs to help me win this year. If I'm going south, which is the total rebuild, I am not necessarily looking for people who can fill up my lineup right now, although that's not a bad thing because they might turn into starters later. So I would spend 40%, I would allocate 40% of my FAAB budget to next man up. I would allocate 40% to developing talent, and I'll take dart throw chances of up to 20%. And then if I'm headed east, I'm in that chip in a chair situation, or I've just kind of ended up over there, I'll spend half of my budget on next man up. These would be people that can help me get over the hump and into the playoffs, and then who knows what happens after that. Anything can happen if you're in the tournament. 20% on developing talent, and I'm much more willing to take my chances on dart throws here because if I hit a high upside player who then inserts into my starting lineup in the fantasy playoffs, that might be enough to put me over the top and get me a championship, even though I have a roster that has no business competing for one. Now, earlier, I also talked about trade. And in some leagues, including any Dynasty league that I am the commissioner of, FAAB is tradable to other players and other teams, other managers. So if your FAAB is tradable, it becomes an asset that you can use. Instead of chasing after waiver wire people, you can use it to turn it into a player off someone else's bench. And the amount of budget that I'm willing to send in a trade is exactly equal to the amount that I'm willing to spend on next man up, because presumably that's what I'm acquiring is a guy who's going to come into my lineup either immediately or with one circumstance, an injury to a running back. I've got bye-mageddon and 3 of my starting running backs are on bye, whatever it happens to be. I am going to treat that trade of FAAB as acquiring a next man up or a kind of player, or perhaps I can package some other assets together and get a set and forget player who would go into my lineup immediately. So I'm willing to spend up to 60% of my FAAB budget on trades if I'm going north, up to 80% of it if I'm going west, because I want people who are going to help me win right now. And the ones who are on other people's rosters who have a productive history behind them are going to do that. If I'm going south, I'm not as interested in trading FAAB unless I'm getting a prospect player who will help me later, or perhaps I'm trading for someone who is injured and who cannot help a contender this year. And so I don't need their help this year, but they can help me next year. Or I'm trying to get draft picks. And so this is a sweetener to get draft picks. Up to 40% of my FAAB budget would go toward that. And if I'm in the East, I'm willing to spend up to half of my budget in a trade to get other pieces and other assets as I either try to win a championship now with a subpar roster, or I strike out in one of the other 3 directions, and that's going to be my strategic direction for several seasons to come. So now let's answer once and for all the other biggest question, other most frequent question that I get. When should I spend my FAAB? Should I be aggressive and spend it all early? Should I hang on to it so I can spend it later? And the answer to that question is you spend FAAB when players who fill roster holes in a strategic way are available. That could be week 2. That could be week 10. That could be week 14. That could be August. That could be December. That could be February. Whenever that happens to be, that's when you spend it. It's not a question of looking at the calendar or early or late. It is a question of when someone is available, when someone who can help you is available. That's when you spend it. That's why the question is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's not strategic whether I spend early or late in any real sense. What matters is I have it when I want to spend for people who I can really use. And if I'm not wasting it chasing after dart throws to rearrange my patio furniture, then I'll have it when I need it. So I know I covered a lot. We will have some notes on this, and I will bring this up additional times, including probably next week, when we will dive into one of the most critical and least understood aspects of trading in Dynasty, and that is called arbitrage. It won't be as dull as it sounds. It's actually pretty cool what you can do if you understand how arbitrage works and what it is, and how you can read your league mates into turning something that someone considered lower value into something that someone else considers a higher value, and profiting in value for yourself in that process. So that will be next week. Hopefully you like what we've been doing here at Dynasty Compass. I certainly hope you do. I'm trying to create a show that helps guide you, get your team where you want it to go. Please subscribe. Please give us some ratings if they're positive, but we'll take the negative ones too, but give us positive ones, please. Share it on social media. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues about it. I understand if you don't want to tell your league mates about it now, I get that, but tell everyone else, please. And we will see you next week to talk about arbitrage, and every week after that, go out and win your leagues, guys. Go out and win your leagues. Thank you for watching or listening.